Okay. So for those of you on the recording, I know lots of you are, there is a class next Monday, which is bank holiday, Easter Monday, but there are so many bank holidays in the spring that some of them we will just continue straight through, and this is going to be one of them because we've got the Friday already, and then there's another 2 bank holidays coming up in May as well, which is going to impact our classes. So just trying to minimize the disruption to our 2-hour sessions is important at the moment. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. This disruption is mostly caused by something called work, which I have quite a severe aversion to. But it does seem this work malarkey disrupts all the other fun stuff. But yes, most of the time, don't have to do this work on a Monday, but occasionally I do. Anyway, so what I thought we would continue on with is our exploration into sort of arms and chest and ribs and the thoracic spine, T-spine. I thought would be useful. We've been looking at that a little bit. And particularly as a lot of us are getting out in our gardens and that sort of stuff starting to happen. Just change my view on here actually. Yeah, getting out into our gardens and doing doing a lot more. It's a little bit like spring couch to 5K, isn't it? We do nothing for the winter, sit around eating snacks, watching Netflix, doing all the fun things that we like to do, and then a little bit of sunshine, and we all stick on a strappy top and rush outside and do 18-hour days, heavy lifting in the garden, and then funnily enough we don't feel so great for it afterwards. So I thought we'd have a look at how we unwind that. I was really interested to read an article last week where somebody said, or somebody was theorizing that looking at screens and looking at phones doesn't actually cause forward head posture. It's it's the fact that we don't move in the opposite direction after every engagement that causes us to come into the habitual pattern. So whilst we look at phones being a cause, and the answer would be to take the phone out of the equation, I think what the study was looking at was, the fact that we are in a digital world and we can't disengage, which has long been a point of mine, because you can't just disengage from working at the desk every day if that's your job and it supports your life. So how do we put these movement breaks or train ourselves to move in an equal and opposite movement to the one that we've been doing previously? So I thought we could have a think about that. So we won't spend too long on our back, and you've already been down for a while, so just spreading the toes and feeling that the edges of the feet can pull into the ground. And when we think about the edges of the feet, long little toe side and the inside of the heel and the big toe joint, starting to just become aware of that whole foot. And just noticing the parts of the foot that are happy to connect with the ground, parts of the foot that are not so connected to the ground, parts that might be heavy and in a state of collapse, parts that might be standing away from the floor, or maybe even being pushed away from the floor by other parts of the feet. Always an interesting one. particularly if we get into the trap of wanting to create arches for the feet. And then we start to push the floor away a little bit, or if we feel the need to hold ourselves up, can we let the pull of the earth, the gravity, pull us back down into the center of the earth where we belong? We are deeply connected right through the earth, because gravity doesn't bounce off the ground, it goes through it. So when we think of it like that, we don't have to balance on the earth, and we don't have to push ourselves away from it to hold ourselves up. We can just let the tensional networks of the body do what they're designed to do. So we'll just pull the feet, the edges of the feet, long little toe side and big toe joint, and the inside of the heel. And if we just pull down through the left long little toe side, and that's right big toe and right inside of the heel, it just takes the knees over to the side, and seeing if we can just start a kind of a metronome movement, maybe just initiated by a pull down of the feet. You work with staying away from the end range for a minute. The knees don't have to come to the floor, particularly if it's your first rotation of the day, your first twist of the day. Can we just play with a pull down through the feet and just following the knees as far as they are happy to go? And as we feel the feet coming heavy into the ground, as the knees go out to the side, there's a point where the feet can just pull down to the ground. It's almost like they snatch the knees back. The brain gets very excited about all this stuff. It wants to put us into this massive rotation where the knees are on the floor and the shoulders are on the floor and all of this stuff. And we always go for the big gross movements, the big end range, particularly for those of us that have got a large spectrum of movement. Can we work with inhibiting that movement just a little bit? So like I say, it's almost like a metronome movement where the weight is in the center, it's in the back of the pelvis, it's in the heels, it's in the deep center of the foot. So when we keep that pull into the ground, the knees go to the side, the rotation starts to happen in the spine, and then the feet can just engage and take us back to center. And it's just exploring that movement, noticing that the spine lengthens. The low spine particularly likes this one and starts to lengthen in response to that. Start to feel that the side of the waist can open up a little bit or a little bit more. Can we get space between the ribs and the top of the hip? And again, the space between the ribs and the top of the hip happens when the knees are sort of halfway between the midpoint and the floor. There's so much that happens in that halfway point where the feet are still very well connected and the side of the hips and the back of the hips still very well connected into the ground. And it's an interesting one because we can't have the legs hanging out of the socket at this point because it pulls on the back of the pelvis. It doesn't feel very nice. So we have to stay in that space where the feet and the pelvis are still pulling back down into the ground, which fires the central core system. So you can feel the muscles on the inside of the spine. You can feel the tummy muscles. And these are the drivers of our laying twist. And after a while, even though the knees don't come down to the ground, what we find is, a little bit like the tube of toothpaste, there starts to become space upwardly through the ribby spine, through the back of the neck, and the eyes sink back and the tongue sinks back and the head gets heavy. It's a good lesson for us because we haven't gone into what we would term the full movement. The question that hangs over that is, do we need a full movement? Depends what you want to achieve from it. At this point, we just want to create space, unwind whatever the gravity and the operator, we'll call this the operator, whatever gravity and the operator have been up to recently. The next time we come back to center, we're going to place the hands on the pointy parts of the ribs at the base. If you trace your fingers down the V shape in the center of the ribs and then under that pointy part at the base of the ribs, and then that will take you round to the waist. This is called costal margins. Costal margins are really interesting to me. They're mostly cartilage till you get really round the sides. Mostly cartilage, so they're quite soft. Yet there's a lot of attachments here, diaphragm on the inside for one, but tummy muscles and all sorts of other bits and pieces like to connect here. And it's also the house of our personal power and our boundaries. Always interesting when we have big holidays coming up for us. They can be a little bit challenging if you've got to engage with family members. We always have a good laugh at Christmas about the in-laws invading. It's kind of the same at Easter for some of us as well. If it's the Easter holidays, you might be getting invaded by very small people that are very noisy, unpredictable, and you're not used to them. So how do we find a moment's peace and calm? And peace and calm comes just by letting the fingers sink at the base of the ribs and just noticing if we're holding tension. Just at the edges of those costal margins or just into the soft tissue of the solar plexus. And there's lots of funky monkey organs in here getting up to all sorts of things. They should be quietly processing their things, but some of them might feel a little bit distressed. So we're just very soft strokey movement that follows the V from the center downwards and outwards to the sides. We don't want to get too pokey or proddy with it. Listen to what's going on. If you've got an organ that's just feeling a bit grouchy today, just rest through the back of the pelvis and breathe broad. And we just offer those organs a little bit of love. They are the storehouse for our emotions, so they can be working hard on things that we may not even be aware of. Failing that, if we have been lured in by the commercialization of Easter and we've maybe indulged in some early chocolate eggs, you might find that the liver and those other organs associated with digestion, processing of fats and sugars and things, might just need a little bit of love as well. So we're just going to bring the knees into the chest, give the knees a nice hug, have a little rock from side to side. And we're going to come over onto whichever side is comfortable for you. And we're going to find our way forwards into our square pose. So as always, have enough padding padding underneath the wrists and the hands, padding underneath the knees if you need it. And we're just letting the feet go long. Let the sit bones be free, particularly if you've been sitting down a lot this morning. Feels like the bottom's sticking out, but we're just letting the drawbridge of the sacrum just unfurl. Letting the front of the ankles unfurl. And then just letting the jaw come into the back of the head. Let the eyes sink back. And just draw a line from the tip of your nose to the back of your head. And imagine that your nose is travelling back along that line. And what you might find is that as the nose travels back towards the back of the head, it just gives you a little bit more space under the jaw. That place where the jaw meets the neck, there's that angle, the hyoid angle there. So as the nose travels back on that little line that we've drawn in our mind, literally in our mind, because it's going back through the brain to the back of the head, it's a subtle movement. It just feels like the nose draws in and back, and this gives us lots of space at the base of the spine, base of the skull, top of the spine. If you're not sure and you can't find it in your square pose, it's fine, because like I say, it's quite subtle. And if you want to find it, you can find it in, or if it's elusive, you can just place the backs of the hands underneath the jaw, chin at the front, and then just smooth the jaw. And we're going back and up diagonal. And after a couple of smooths, what we start to find is that the jaw and the head can go in and back and up and start to create space in the neck again. And keep going until you start to feel that down the sides of the neck into the top of the shoulders. Might even take you down as far as T12 to sort of base of the ribs. You know, all our heads are forward. I don't think there isn't anyone left now. Because, you know, even if we don't use screens, we still drive and we're still taking in a lot of information in front of us. So just this, you know, this stroking movement, we can do this all the time. We can do this whenever we've been out in the car or whenever we get home, or if we know we've been on the computer. I'm midway down an essay at the moment, so this is my favourite, or one of my favourite go-tos for this. Fuzzy focus, sharp focus is the other one that sorts the head positioning out. So if we come back to our square pose, if you came out of it. If you didn't, you're having a lovely time here finding your head at the end of your spine, because if we keep working with this nose going back through the head, we start to feel that the head picks up the spine on the inside front. It's a big piece of elastic, anterior longitudinal ligament. Funnily enough, we just call it an ALL. So, but we want that suspension, and I think I said this last time, we've done this with Dave before, Dave the skeleton, you know, when we threaded him through with the blue TheraBand. We've got this lovely ligament that sits on the front of the spine, and it comes through a set of muscles and attaches into the head. So the head really connects us into the thoracic spine. Can we pick up and drop, touch in with, when we draw the nose back through the head and the tongue follows, it starts to mess around with your diaphragm. So if you start yawning, that's perfectly normal. Don't stifle the yawns, let them come through and out. And just in your mind's eye, can we touch in with each individual neck vertebrae? There are 7 of them. So see if you can count 7 from behind your nose all the way down to the top of your, very top of your shoulders, to sort of become behind your collarbones is where we're headed. So we start to feel that as the nose comes in, there's a point where maybe we can start to introduce some space to the neck spine. So we just let the jaw follow the tongue, and that will take the crown of the head away towards the wall in front of you. And the head goes quite far away forward towards the wall in front of you before it starts to roll down. So it's like if you had a paintbrush on the top of your head, it would go forwards towards the wall in front of you and then paint a stripe down the wall in front of you. It's that kind of lengthening away. I'm going to find the index fingers and the middle finger knuckles. And we're really finding the V shape between the index finger knuckle and the middle finger knuckle. So there's a big V shape in the palm. Can we find that and pull that down into the ground? We want to keep the elbows a little bit soft with that nice rotation, so the pointy parts of the elbows are looking back towards your thighs. And then we're just pulling down right in the very, very middle of that V. So it's where the 2 knuckles sit together in the palm of the hand. When we do that, we keep just pulling down through there. We might find that there's an expansion that starts to happen into the underarms. So there's a broadness that starts to happen because this part of the hand is connected to pec major and muscles around the sides of the back sides of the ribs. So when we press there, we kind of get this broadening that starts to happen across the tips of the shoulder blades, at the base of the shoulder blades. And maybe that causes a little bit of freedom behind the heart, that part of the T-spine. And it's stiff there. It's meant to be stiff there because it's providing protection for the very important lungs that live inside. But also we need there to be strength, but also a little bit of slide and glide, a little bit of movement. We need the breath to be able to go in there. And you might find that as you breathe with this pull down into the hands, and rest them when you need to, because it can be really challenging for wrists. So you might find that the wrists get a little bit grievous, but just come off them, give them a shake, and then come back in again. And again, like I say, just make sure you've got enough padding. So fold your mat, get some blanket or cushion underneath you if you need it. Because if we keep pulling down through this V shape in the hands, we keep finding that broadness into the side of the ribs and the underarm. Space behind the heart. Really quiet space, great place to sit for meditation. Always feels like quite a wise old place when you go in there. Part of the body that really knows stuff. So when we feel that broadening, we might find that then there's a little bit more softness and length to the low spine. Tail starts to get drawn away. So actually, when we find the hands and we feel this very subtle lift in the elbows and this lovely space that opens up in the underarms and the side of the ribs, as that broadens and the thoracic lengthens, we find that the waist, as the pelvis pulls away, we find that the waist gets sucked in at the sides. It's a bit like our finger trap. You know, when we pull the finger trap tight, it gets sucked in at the middle. And that's what happens in this movement. When we connect the vortex of the hands, when we let that spinning wheel get pulled down into the ground, a bit like a whirlpool, I suppose. When we let that get pulled by gravity into the ground, it wakes up the spiral of tissues that encase your arms and plugs them back into the rib space. Then we start to work with the outer and inner casings of the ribs, all the tissues that line the inner and outer sides of the ribs. So then they can broaden, which is what they're supposed to do. And we feel that the low spine gets drawn long, tail goes away, and then the waist gets pulled in at the sides towards the spine. And again, it's subtle. We don't have to do anything. This is just a set of intentions actually that drives an outcome, which is interesting because we're always taught to do things. If we want to achieve things, you know, we have to physically pull the waist in, we have to physically contract muscles or do something. And actually the body's far more intelligent than that. It's running far faster than that. If we put it back in gravity the way it's supposed to be, then it sorts itself out into an arrangement that works well for the environment it's in. So the shoulder blades naturally pull together on the back of the body when we've got this spaciousness in the underarms and a broadening to the chest. So if we think about that, and if you're just working with head, ribs and waist in your cat pose, it's enough. It may be enough. But if we want to take the toes underneath and introduce the toes to the ground and just let the balls of the feet get acquainted with the ground. Let them go back into gravity. Front of the ankles nice and soft as it detaches from the heel. The softness at the front of the ankle helps there to be a spaciousness between the root of the toes and the snooker ball heel. That's where the dexterity of the foot comes from, is in all those little bones in the front of the ankle, very, very top of the foot. The more space we've got there, it's a little bit like a Rubik's Cube. And we want all our cubes and our sides to be slidey and glidey in there. And a lot of the time they're not, they're just all bunched up together and squashed. And they're not free to allow the foot to do what it wants to do. So we just let big toe, balls of the feet get pulled down into the ground, and this pulls open the plantar fascia, which is the center sole of the foot. And then that gives us a freedom to the front of the ankle. So the ankle feels like it's being pulled back towards the wall behind you. Toes go down, heel goes back. It's a very definite movement when we feel that we're pulling the feet into the ground. You push the feet into the ground, it's quite interesting. You get completely the opposite effect. If you push the toes into the ground, pushes the heels and the knees forwards, and then the knees start complaining because we're too far forward towards the kneecap. And there's pain circuit breakers in there that you know send a message similar to "Oi, get off." So we want the toe to pull down into the ground that pulls the heel back towards the wall behind you. And this starts to promote slide and glide in the shins, in the ankles. We want this. So if we find that V shape in the hands again, and find the nose. Lost my nose. Nose towards the back of the head. Hands get pulled down into the ground. Broadness into the underarms. Long thoracic, long lumbers. All going out into the tail. And then dropping down the legs into the feet. So now we've got this kind of waist. Comes with a sound effect. Now we've got this sort of sucked in waist. It's a great opportunity for us to just keep following the pull of the feet and the ankles that are going back towards the wall behind you and the sit bones that are going back towards the wall behind you. All of that stuff all gets drawn back. And with this lovely long waist, what we find is that as one foot comes into the floor, or maybe both feet come into the floor, you find your own way up. I haven't moved enough today, so I'm going to do one at a time. We just start finding the feet. Don't lose your arms, because as soon as you lose your arms, you're going to lose your waist as well. So keep pulling those V shapes down into the ground. Broadness under the arms. Pull down with the feet. So as we come up, in fact that we come up is incidental, but now we've got that V in the hands that broadens the ribs, that gives us that lovely concave waist. It's the house of a lot of power because the legs now feel bolted into the pelvis. which leaves the legs free to hang down from the hips. So very much connected to that sucked in waist. So just playing with that version of your dog. Like I say, if you're happy to be in your square pose and playing with that, and just playing with that, then it's enough. And you'll know when you've got it because there's literally nothing for shoulders and hips to do. Literally nothing for knees and elbows to do. It's all supported by that inside. The lifting up of the diaphragm, the you know, that sucking in of the waist pulls all the connective tissue structures strongly in towards the spine so that it can do its job. It's like the pole in your wardrobe. It's just there to hang your legs and arms off. That's not the greatest analogy I ever came up with, I don't think. It's a bit macabre, isn't it? Hanging all your legs and arms up in the wardrobe. But yeah. And we feel that it's the prerequisite for our handstand. Because when we come up into our downward dog this way, we've got such a feeling of lightness and lift into the pelvis that feet don't need to stay on the floor. Like I say, we don't need to do as much as we think we need to do. We stay with the V's in the hand. Stay with the pull down of the feet. Don't forget your nose back towards the back of your head. It's usually the first thing to go, particularly when we're getting into downward dogs and we've got grand ideas about getting our bottom in the air. You know, as soon as we push the floor away with the hands, we get all chocked up in the top of the shoulder side of the neck. So can we go back? It's challenging initially, which is why it might just be cat pose for today or square pose or whatever it is, because to get the connection from the V shape of the hand, we're looking at this point between the index finger knuckle and the middle finger knuckle. When we pull down into that, there has to be some softness and space into the wrist. And that can be tricky if the hands are caught up. So have we got enough space between the base of the little finger, which is right down by the wrist, across to the base of the thumb, the real root of the thumb as it connects to the wrist? Have we got space there? Might be worth getting a thumb in there and creating some space before it presents back to the floor. Have we got space in the elbow? This is good. Looks good, Sarah Jane. So next time we come down, we're just going to come back into our lovely child pose. Just rest for a second. Notice the breath, because when we connect the arms this way into the underarms, and we find that freedom into the underarms, and the ribs become a bit freer, we might find we've got a little bit more space to breathe, a little bit more lung capacity available. This is good. So we'll come back to our using our square pose as a transitional pose, but I want to try with our lovely new waist. So tuck the toes under, and we can come up onto the fingers. Really take the body weight back a little bit, but again we're drawing the nose towards the back of the head, which lifts us out of the heart center, lifts us out of the thing. And again, finding the finger, finding that V shape in the hands. And the hands are lighter on the floor because the body weight is back a bit further. So just feeling that pull into the hands, and we get that changes. It's this feeling of the elbow just turns ever so slightly. We feel it down into the underside of the arms, into the side of the rib. Gives us this really long feeling here. So don't lose the nose. So that we can, as the body weight goes back, we keep that connection into the underarms, we can find a foot to come through between the hands. Now, if it's better to have the hands elevated, you can do that. Particularly if being down here is a bit of a pain, and it can be initially. So, but we want something that we can get our hands into, so that we get that broadness into the ribs. Because what we find is, with that little bit of broadening and lift to the ribs, the foot can come through, which gives us a really good base to then step up and through. But when we step up, when we bring the back leg through, we've already got our front leg through. When we've got our back leg through, we start with the nose. Nose goes into the back of the head. Head goes up and back into the gravity line. Chest is going to swing underneath that. Pelvis is going to swing underneath it. And the foot just effortlessly floats through. Ha ha ha, she says. But when we think about the positioning of our head in relation to the rest of our body, and that our body is hanging down from our head, not the other way around, then it makes us more mindful. So particularly for those of us that are getting on and off the floor in the garden at the moment, if we're already looking at the border, getting down can be a bit of a trouble, but it's exactly the same as when we're already down. If we've been digging and our head has come forward because we're looking at what we're doing, if we try to get up from that, it's actually really hard work, because my very heavy bowling ball is at the wrong end of the body. So we lift with the head first. We have to look up, and we do that by, if we imagine this drawstring of the nose going through the head, we let the nose go back, which takes the jaw back and puts the head back at the top of the spine. Then the connective tissues around the spine can all mobilize themselves, and the arms can come back around the ribs as well. Same as having the hands on the floor, and we're finding the space into the broadness of the ribs. I've already engaged the arms back around the ribs, so they're not heavy and they're not hanging off anymore. It's about, how do I arrange myself in gravity to find the path of least resistance? So I'm going to put my head at the top of my spine. I'm going to put the heavy arms back round, get rid of your heavy objects and put them back into line. So that then when we're coming up and through, I've already got my arms around my ribs. My legs are plugged in to the underside of the diaphragm. They're not hanging out of the hips. So we just float up into our standing. And try this on both sides. These are really important skills that are really starting to come through for us now, because we're talking about how do we live into the end stages of life, but how do we keep mobile? People are living longer than they ever have, but their quality of life generally from the age of about 60 onwards is really, really poor. And it isn't very fun. So getting on and off the floor easily, but it's not easily, it's efficiently. So can I get down to the ground without crashing my knee on the ground? And how do we do that? We plug the legs into the underside of the diaphragm. We feel like we've got the sling under our bottom. Really important for when we're going up and down stairs. Really important when we're standing up. Head comes in, ribs lift up, but the pelvis is already traveling back underneath the rest of the arrangement. And with the legs plugged into the underside of the diaphragm and the arms wrapped around the back of the ribs, I've now got something that will take me up and off the floor and through. Is this making sense? Are we having fun? It's an interesting one because, the desire to try and, this is where we have to get control of our minds and our thoughts. Because from here, the desire to push the floor away is really, really high. Because we can just leave us through the knees. But the problem that we have, particularly as women when we get postmenopause, is we don't have the muscle tone around the knees to support that anymore, and the knees start taking the weight. So can we take that back into the center? Inside back of the pelvis, sides of the waist, those oblique muscles, rectus on the front, of course. So starting to utilize the corset of the waist, all of them, not just the favorite ones. And we do have favorites. Quadratus lumborum tends to be one of the big favorites, which are these nice long pork fillet type muscles here. Psoases also get lent on quite heavily, and the other muscles are all just left to left to nothing. So with our hands, just going to give our hands a little rub, get some energy flowing. Or just warm them up in my face, which seems to be something. I'm going to take the thumbs. You might find that you've got nice fuzzy hands now. Just going to take the thumbs and just slide them in behind the ears, and just sliding in and under the skull. When you've got a jaw puller. An interesting one here as well. If you let the thumbs sink into the back of the neck and then make your eyes look from left to right, might even be able to feel the optic nerve firing, or the optic. They're the optic muscles, but they respond to the optic nerve. And interestingly, if you take your eyes over to the left, but you don't move your head, what you can feel is the muscles in the back of your head mobilizing, ready to get your head to turn to the left to see whatever it is that your brain is anticipating you seeing. Because usually we've heard something first, or we smelt something first, and then one of the other senses has come in, and then the eyes come in, and then it's going to take the head with it. But we don't do that because we're stopping the process. But you can feel the muscles mobilizing under your under your thumbs. It's quite interesting because my initial thought was, well, if that one's getting ready to mobilize and I haven't, and I'm not even doing anything, what else is going on behind the scenes that I'm not aware of? Ready for action, you know, which as our bodies are. So as we just sit with the head onto the thumbs, let the head really rest back into the hands. The more we let the head rest back into the hands, the more the elbows get drawn in towards the center line. It's an interesting one because the more we pull the head back into the spine and the more the spine elongates, the more the spine invites shoulder blades back towards the center line, the more the arms get drawn into their sockets. It's quite, you know, we start off sort of elbows out here somewhere with the arms a bit disconnected, but if we just letting that head sink back, switches off fight and flight, calms down the nervous system, all of that stuff. It's lovely, lovely things. So if you have been having a little bit of a busy day, this is a good one to do. And what we're looking for it to do, initially we feel it in the neck. But if we just keep letting the head sink back and let the hands take the weight and the elbows come in, we start to feel again underarm space, softening and allowing. We might feel that the rib cage starts to just drop away from the arms a little bit. It's a nice stretch into the pectorals on the front, gets us a lot of space into the underarms, which is useful. But we feel if we just keep dropping back, lengthening, dropping back, lengthening, that at some point the ribs get drawn in and under, not the ribs, the tummy underneath the ribs, this bit goes in and back and down, and then the pelvis gets nice and heavy. And if the arms get tired, I'm here for ages, sorry. If the arms get tired, just give them a wave. But you guys knew that already, so do whatever feels nice. And we just keep coming in and out. Just keep coming in and out. Because eventually where we're going to get down to is the feet. Keep hanging the spine from underneath the skull. We hang the ribs from underneath the skull. We hang the pelvis down. It frees the hips. You know when you've got it because you might feel that your pelvis tilts outwards or tilts under because it's sorting itself out. I'm always perpetually tilted under, so mine always tilts in the other direction, which feels a bit weird. It feels like I'm sticking my bottom out, but it's not. It's actually where the lumbar curve should be. So you just let everything hang, and we just keep coming back into the feet. Now it might feel a little bit wobbly through the toes and the inner and outer edges of the feet as they connect with the ground. Because again, we don't have to push the floor away, so we keep pulling down into the ground with the feet. Because they plug into the underside of the solar plexus and everything hangs down from the skull. We have to change our ideas of standing or balancing on the earth. Can we stand equally on both sides? Do we have a preference for one side or the other? And that helps to sort out the hips at the top. So the more the feet get pulled down, the more space, front of the ankle, back of the knee, front of the hip, that pulling up feeling, we get space at the hip then, and then the hips start to sort themselves out. And you might find that the tummy, the obliques particularly, if they're a little bit underused, or the front of the tummy, rectus abdominis, if it's a little bit underused, has to work quite hard. Notice your kneecaps. Just notice that my right one is hitched, so we'll let that drop. We just keep playing with it, nothing's wrong. Just keep playing with it. Noticing where the glitch is in the puckers in the onesie. Muscles that hold on too much. Kneecaps that are permanently lifted, one side or the other or both. Hip flexors permanently switched on. Why? Come back into the feet and find that place where it feels like the things switch off. And it's interesting because when the overworkers switch off, you can feel the muscles that underwork start to kick in, and it might be quite tiring for them. So we have to come out and then we come back in again. Tough habits to break when we've been using them for a very, very long time. So we have to keep just introducing the notion, the idea that we could use a different part of the body to do the job. So that everybody's at their appropriate length and everybody's at their appropriate strength and everybody's doing what they should be doing, not too much, not too little. This is good. So we'll just come down to sitting. Stay with the head positioning if you can. You might find that it throws you quite heavily into peripheral vision, particularly if you're in sharp focus a lot of the time, so it can feel a little bit wonky that you're seeing way more of the room than you're used to and less of the sharp image directly ahead of you. Paradoxical seeing as we're on the computer, but there you are. But we just find, stay in that peripheral vision, stay with the nose going back to the back of the head and just resting the hands somewhere around the knees. Have the legs long or legs crosswise or whatever feels nice, but we're looking for that pull down at the sit bones again. So maybe that tilt at the sit bone. Again, just noticing your breathing. And then just feeling the floor underneath your feet. So just bringing the soles of the feet into the ground. Give them a rub on your mat or your carpet. This helps to ground the body back onto planet Earth. And just blinking your eyes, look around the room a little bit. Just bring yourself back into your environment. Giving the fingers and toes a wiggle. Make some nice rotations with the wrists and the ankles. Have a nice stretch through the body, taking the arms up over the head. Good. And coming back to centre. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you. And, oh, and a happy spring break, happy Easter, happy Egg Day. however you celebrate. Good.